So today I'm going to be talking about this book, Birdy by Jess Vallance. This book is in the young adult category, and it is another one that I picked up on a whim since I'd never heard of the author before or the book, but I read the back cover and I thought it might be an interesting read. Frances is one of those friendless but mostly flying below the radar types. As she says herself, she doesn't really have any friends, but she's mostly not the target for bullying either. Generally speaking, she considers herself to be pretty much invisible. She describes herself as being like one of those ghostly characters in a movie who hasn't realised that they're dead yet, despite the fact that they're completely unable to interact with those around them. She describes her first rejection when she first started school, and this seemed to set the tone for the rest of her school career. So when she's asked to babysit the new girl for a few days, she's really expecting more of the same and doesn't want to do it. She thinks that once she's shown the new girl where the toilets are, she'll be dropped for the more exciting girls in school. But she is intrigued by one thing, the fact that her teacher says that the new girl she'll be looking after has experienced some sort of scandal in the past and needs gentle handling. This throws her off long enough for her to be perceived as agreeing to the idea, and before she can disabuse this notion, the girl is there, being handed over to her like a fresh human sacrifice. The new girl is different to the other students when Frances does finally meet her. She comes out with strange stories about what her life was like up until starting at the school. She'd been home educated up until that point, and her unfamiliarity with the way that school works was quite entertaining. For instance, after realising she wasn't really that keen on learning French, she decided she'd just wander into a different classroom and start clay modelling instead. She was also quite baffled by the fact that the children had to keep running around the school when they were switching classrooms, instead arguing that it surely made more sense for the teachers to come to them. On that point, I can't help agreeing with her. I've experienced schools where the students switched rooms, and also a school where the teachers did the switching, and I have to say the latter was much calmer at switchover time. But all this is quite confusing to Alberta, who ends up with the nickname Bert, and she makes quite a few newbie mistakes before settling down into the school routine. As the weeks go on, it seems that Bert isn't going anywhere after all. She's a bit different, perhaps, a little bit eccentric due to having a bit of a different upbringing to the rest of the kids in the school. And this is something that Frances can identify with, albeit in a different way. Although Bert is not really a fringe, hemp-weaving, yoghurt knitting type, as it turns out her family has some serious money, and Bert thinks nothing of spending and sharing that cash. Frances allows a friend to buy her the occasional bag of crisps and can of Coke, but isn't really comfortable when a new friend starts offering to buy her expensive clothing and mobile phones as well. Even though most 15-year-olds these days have mobile phones, Frances doesn't. With a bit of a tragic backstory, she's living with her grandparents, and they are obviously older and more traditional. Her grandmother sees no reason why Frances should need a mobile phone, asking her why she thinks she's so important that she needs to be contactable at all times. And I don't think this was necessarily done from a neglectful, cruel point of view. It's just from one of somebody who can't accept that times have changed. But in the end, Frances does accept one of Bert's hand-me-down phones, so that they can text and call each other, although she keeps the fact that she has one from her grandmother. And it is mainly from her grandmother rather than her grandparents, because by this point her grandfather is clearly sliding into some kind of dementia, and often mistakes Frances for her long-dead mother, the mother whose name shall never be mentioned in front of her grandmother. But by now he seems to be too far gone to remember not to talk about she who shall not be named, and barely knows where he is, never mind that his wife doesn't like to talk about their late daughter. And I've got to admit, it was quite sad to read that, describing the person that you've loved your whole life disappearing behind the eyes, even while leaving an empty shell of themselves behind as a constant painful reminder of all that they'd been but never will be again. To watch somebody that you love disappear like that can't be easy. So Frances starts to realise that Bert doesn't seem to be going anywhere. They've developed a routine in their friendship, created nicknames for each other, as well as a joint name for their little group of two. They've got in-jokes and everything. And after a while, Frances feels that she's confident enough now in a new friend to ask what the scandal was that led Bert to being banished to mainstream education. She seems to perceive that this had been done as a punishment for some horrendous crime. Bert reveals, with some embarrassment, that she'd thrown a brick through a car window. And when I read that, I thought, is that it? I mean, obviously I'm not saying that's an okay thing to do. And any kids out there, not that anyone's watching this, don't do that. But in the grand scheme of terrible crimes, did they really think that was considered scandalous? I mean, that's not even the worst thing I've done today. After a while, Bert does elaborate on the story a little more, which explains why she did what she did and why it prompted her parents to want her taken in hand a little. By now, Frances is comfortable with her new and unexpected friend, but she's also possessive. And when she realises that she's not the only one to enjoy Bert's company, she takes steps to sort out the problem. Unfortunately, this has the opposite effect to the one she wanted, driving Bert further away rather than making her realise that Frances should be her only friend. And if you thought Frances would learn from this, you'd be wrong. Instead, Frances decides to take more drastic measures, with terrible consequences. I won't say what they are because I think the book is worth reading and finding out for yourself. It definitely didn't go in the direction that I expected it to. And despite everything, I couldn't help feeling sorry for the villain of the story. I didn't feel that her bitterness was entirely unjustified, even if her methods were, in the end, unacceptable. So did I enjoy this book? As a shorter book, it was quite a quick read, and I did really get into the story. When it first started, I was expecting it to end in a certain way, and it turned out I was completely wrong, which is good. You don't want things to be too predictable. Well, that's it for now, and if you made it this far without falling asleep, thank you for watching. Bye!